Welcome to Terror Beyond the Dream, where nightmares don't end when you wake up. Step into a world of haunted forests, forgotten houses, ancient curses, and creatures that lurk just beyond the firelight. Every week, immerse yourself in original horror stories told with chilling atmosphere, deep psychological tension, and spine-tingling narration. Whether you crave tales of the supernatural, psychological dread, or the horrors hidden within the human soul, you've found your dark home. Subscribe and try to sleep with the lights off.
Rain not gentle, but the kind that sounds like God emptying a celestial quarry onto the tin roof of the world. It hammered the windshield of Ben's ancient Suburban, blurring the tortured pines into skeletal smears beyond the frantic wipers. Inside, the air hung thick with damp wool, stale sweat, and the metallic tang of fear. 6 of us. 6 fools seeking shelter from a storm that felt less like weather and more like a malevolent purge. Anywhere, Ben, Christ, anywhere. Maya's voice, usually a soothing alto, was shrill wire. She clutched her sleeping bag like a shield, knuckles white. Beside her, Liam, her stoic husband, just stared grimly ahead, jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. "I see it, Maya," Ben muttered, his knuckles matching hers on the steering wheel. The headlights, feeble yellow eyes, finally snagged on something solid amidst the writhing darkness. A cabin. Not quaint, not welcoming. A hulking silhouette of shadowed logs, hunched against the storm like a diseased animal. One window, a jagged, black mouth, gaped where glass should have been. The porch sagged, a broken spine. "Looks abandoned," Chloe offered, her voice too bright, too forced. She was the optimist, the glue. It already felt brittle. Beside her, Dave, our resident skeptic and history buff, snorted. "Abandoned implies someone wanted it. Place looks cursed." His usual dry wit landed like a lead balloon. We piled out into the maelstrom. Rain instantly plastered my hair to my skull, icy needles against my scalp. The wind howled, a chorus of lost things through the pines, a sound that bypassed the ears and vibrated straight in the bones. The smell hit me as we stumbled onto the porch, damp rot, ancient dust, and beneath it, something else, coppery, faint, like old pennies left in a damp cellar. Forgotten violence. The door wasn't locked. It groaned open on rusted hinges, the sound a raw scrape against the storm's roar. Inside was absolute blackness, thick and velvety, smelling even more intensely of decay, and that unsettling metallic hint. Ben fumbled, and his flashlight beam cut through the gloom like a surgical knife. Dust motes danced in the beam. The cabin was a single large room, dominated by a massive stone fireplace choked with decades of dead leaves and bird nests. Rough-hewn furniture lay overturned, shrouded in cobwebs thick as burial shrouds. The walls were dark wood, stained almost black in places, the knots in the grain like watching eyes. The floorboards were warped, treacherous underfoot, creaking with every step like the groans of something buried beneath. A rickety ladder led up to a loft lost in shadow. "Home sweet nightmare," Dave quipped, but his voice lacked conviction. He swept his own flashlight beam across the walls. "Look at this. Crude carvings, symbols, or just vandalism?" He was right. Faint, deep gouges marred the wood near the fireplace. Not random scratches, but deliberate, angular patterns that made my skin prickle. They looked old. Blood old. We barricaded the broken window with a moldering table and dragged the heaviest furniture. A monstrous oak sideboard against the sagging front door. The wind screamed its protest, finding every gap, every chink. Rain drummed the roof like frantic fingernails. We huddled near the cold fireplace, flashlights creating islands of light in a sea of oppressive dark. Outside, the storm intensified. The pines thrashed, and beneath the wind's shriek. Was that a sound? A low, guttural vibration, felt more than heard, resonating up through the floorboards. I dismissed it as thunder. Imagination, fueled by exhaustion and the oppressive atmosphere. Just the house settling. Just the storm. The whispers started an hour later. At first, I thought it was the wind whizzing through unseen cracks. But no. These were voices, faint, sibilant, layered over each other like dry leaves skittering across stone. Impossible to make out words, just this susurrus of despair and hunger. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, vibrating in the wood grain. "Did you hear that?" Chloe whispered, her eyes wide in the gloom. She huddled closer to Dave. "Hear what?" Ben asked, sharp. He was checking the barricade again, a tire iron glinting dully in his hand. The whispering, like people, talking low. Liam shifted, his face grim. "It's the wind, just the damn wind playing tricks." But it wasn't. Maya whimpered, pressing her hands over her ears. "It's not stopping. It's getting closer." Then came the cold spots, pockets of air so frigid they burned the skin, moving through the room like invisible ghosts, passing through you, leaving a residue of profound dread that sank into the marrow. I saw my breath plume in one, right beside the ladder to the loft, the ladder that led up into utter blackness. Dave, ever the investigator, approached the fireplace, where the carvings were deepest. He traced a finger over one gouge. "These symbols, I swear I've seen them before. In accounts of frontier massacres, warding signs, or invitations." His voice held a tremor he couldn't disguise, a flicker. In the corner of my eye, near the shattered window we'd blocked, a shape, tall, impossibly thin, like a stretched shadow. It was there for a heartbeat, then gone. My blood turned to ice. "Did anyone see?" Before I could finish, Liam jerked upright. His face went slack, eyes rolling back to show the whites. When he spoke, it wasn't his voice. It was a guttural, rasp, ancient and foul, spitting words in a language that scraped like claws on slate. "Mine. This place is mine. Flesh is sweet." Then he gasped, collapsing back, trembling violently, utterly unaware. Panic, sharp and acrid, flooded the room. Maya screamed. Ben raised the tire iron, swinging his flashlight wildly. "What the hell was that?" "Possession," Dave breathed, face ashen. Or something imprinting on the space outside. The guttural vibration returned, stronger, closer. Multiple sources now. A low, rhythmic chuffing sound, interspersed with wet snuffles right against the barricaded door. "Something big. Something testing." Chloe screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the small, grimy window beside the fireplace, the only one we hadn't fully covered. Pressed against the glass, distorted by rain and grime, was a face, or what passed for one. Elongated muzzle, matted with dark fur. Eyes that burned with a sickly, intelligent yellow light. Not animal, predatory. It stared in, unblinking. Then, it was gone. Werewolves. The word slammed into my mind, absurd and terrifyingly apt. Not myth, not Hollywood. These were hunters, intelligent, patient. The siege began in earnest. Thuds against the door. Heavy, deliberate impacts that shook the barricade, scratching sounds, like massive claws scoring deep grooves into the thick logs outside. The whispers in the walls rose to a frantic, overlapping chorus of fear and malice. The cold spots intensified, becoming almost solid barriers of frost. The room shifted. I blinked, and for a disorienting second, the fireplace was on the opposite wall. The door seemed farther away. The walls pulsed with a faint, dark light where the carvings were deepest. Ben roared, charging towards a scratching sound near the window. He swung the tire iron. It connected with something unseen outside with a sickening thud and a yelp of pain. That was disturbingly human. Triumph flashed on his face. It died instantly. A claw, thick as a man's wrist, tipped with a black talon, like obsidian, punched through the log wall beside the window, missing Ben by inches. Showering splinters, it withdrew as quickly as it came. Madness gnawed at the edges of our group. Maya rocked back and forth, humming tunelessly. Lost. Dave frantically sketched the symbols from the wall onto a notepad, muttering about ley lines and blood anchors. Chloe clung to me, her body shaking violently. Liam just stared into the dark corner near the loft ladder, his eyes wide with a terror beyond words. That's when the whispers coalesced, forming a single, chilling phrase inside my head, bypassing my ears. "Welcome home." The first death was Dave. He was trying to decipher his notes by the weak beam of his dying flashlight, muttering about sacrifice sites. A section of the wall near him, riddled with deep carvings, seemed to breathe. The dark wood rippled, like water. Shadows coalesced, forming a shape. Not a wolf, but a man, gaunt and hollow-eyed, wearing tattered frontier clothing, his face a rictus of agony. It lunged out of the wall, a spectral hand grasping Dave's wrist. He screamed, a sound abruptly cut off as he was yanked forward, not through the door, but into the wall itself. His body seemed to dissolve into the dark grain, his scream echoing inside the wood for a terrible second before silence fell. Only his dropped notepad remained. The cabin seemed to sigh. The whispering intensified, triumphant. Maya snapped. With a shriek that tore at the air, she scrambled towards the barricaded door, clawing at the heavy sideboard. "Let me out. I can't be here. IT remembers me." Ben lunged for her, but too late. She wrenched the door open a crack, just enough for the storm and something else to surge in. A flush of matted fur, a gleam of yellow eyes, a wet snarl. A massive paw hooked her shoulder, dragging her screaming into the rain-lashed night. The door slammed shut behind her. Her screams were cut short by a sound that haunts me. The wet, crunching rip of flesh yielding silence, thick and suffocating. Then the feasting sounds began outside. Grunts, snarls, the crack of bone. Liam, staring at the spot where Maya vanished, made a low moan. He looked at Ben, then at the loft ladder. His eyes held a terrible clarity. "They're not just animals," he rasped. "They're the ones who died here, trapped, hungry." He pointed, a shaking finger at the carvings on the wall near where Dave vanished. "The symbols, they're not wards, they're tethers, binding the dead to this place, binding their pain, their rage." Ben, grief and fury twisting his face, raised the tire. "Iron, then we break the damn tethers." He charged towards the symbol-covered wall near the fireplace, weapon raised. Before he could strike, the floorboards beneath him gave a sickening lurch. Not a collapse, but a deliberate shift. He stumbled, off balance. The claw punched through the wall again, lower this time. It caught Ben across the stomach. He gasped, looking down in disbelief at the ruin of his torso. The claw retracted. Ben collapsed, life pouring out of him onto the thirsty, creaking floorboards. His blood seeped into the grooves of the wood, dark and glistening. The symbols nearby seemed to pulse faintly, drinking it in. Only Chloe and I remained, and Liam, who was slowly backing towards the dark maw of the loft ladder, his eyes fixed on the wall where Ben lay dying. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices, frontier settlers, woodsmen, terrified families, all bound by terror, and the symbols carved in their final moments. The werewolves outside slammed against the walls rhythmically, a dreadful drumbeat. The cabin groaned and shifted around us, walls seeming to lean in, the ceiling lowering. "Liam, no," Chloe cried as he placed a foot on the bottom rung of the ladder. The loft above was impenetrable darkness. It felt wrong. A mouth. He turned, his face a mask of sorrow and something else. Recognition. "It's the only way," he whispered. Up, away from the walls. Maybe. He started climbing. That's when the full memory slammed into me. Not a thought, a sensory explosion. The smell of wood smoke and blood, the taste of iron on my tongue, the rough grain of the wall beneath my small, terrified hand. My hand. I was pressing it against the wood, near the fireplace, watching the men with the knives and the hunger in their eyes advance. My family screaming, the crude symbols being carved around me, trapping me, binding my terror as they. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. My hand flew to the wall beside the fireplace, the same spot I'd touched as a child centuries ago. The wood felt warm beneath my palm, alive. My blood pounded in my ears, syncing with the drumming outside. The symbols weren't just tethers for the dead settlers. They were anchors for the rage that killed them. The rage that became the wolves. The rage that had festered here, feeding on death, twisting the trapped souls into these monstrous things outside. And inside, I wasn't just sheltering from the storm. I was drawn back. The whispers weren't just the dead. They were echoes of my terror, my dying cries, amplified and twisted by the cabin's hunger. The wolves, they weren't random monsters. They were born from that night, from the violence done to me and mine. My unquiet spirit, my bound fury, was part of the engine that powered this place. That's why the cabin felt familiar. That's why the whispers said welcome home. Above me, Chloe screamed, a blood-curdling sound, abruptly cut off. Something heavy thudded in the loft. Liam didn't make a sound. I heard only the wet, eager, tearing from above. The wolves had found another way in. Silence descended, heavier than before. The drumming outside stopped. The whispers faded to a low, satisfied hum. The only sound was the relentless rain on the roof and the frantic hammering of my own heart, a heart that shouldn't be beating. I stood alone in the center of the cabin. Ben's blood was a dark pool soaking into the floor near my feet. The symbols on the wall pulsed with a faint, dark light. The air vibrated with anticipation. The barricade at the door groaned. I knew what came next, the final piece returning. To the source, the rage outside, born from my death, drawn back to consume the spark that ignited it, to complete the cycle, to feed the house. The heavy oak sideboard scraped violently across the floor, not pushed from outside, pulled from within. The door groaned open. Rain and wind gusted in, smelling of pine and wet earth and wild, feral musk. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm-lashed night, stood the largest wolf. It was matted with rain and dark substances. Its muzzle dipped low, sniffing the air inside. Its burning yellow eyes locked onto mine. Intelligence burned. There, recognition, not of prey, of kin, of the source. It didn't snarl. It didn't charge. It simply stood, head slightly tilted, those ancient, knowing eyes holding mine. The whispers in the walls rose to a sigh of dreadful welcome. The cabin seemed to lean in, the walls humming with dark energy. The symbols pulsed brighter, drinking in the terror, the blood, the returning fury. Outside, more pairs of yellow eyes ignited in the darkness, watching, waiting. The storm raged on, indifferent. The wolf at the door took a single, deliberate step forward, crossing the threshold. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stood there, in the center of that terrible, familiar room, the taste of old blood and ancient fear thick on my tongue, waiting for the jaws of my own creation to close. The door stood wide open. The invitation was clear. The reckoning was mine.